Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports and Football video, and today I'm going over my Week 18 NFL Power Rankings of the 2022 NFL season. I do Power Rankings on the channel every single week, so if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to come back next week. I'll probably still do a playoff Power Rankings for all the teams that are in the playoffs next week. So when the playoffs start, I will have a Power Rankings for the final season, which teams I think ranked from worst to best. And then obviously the playoffs will be the most important part of that video. So make sure to come back next week or tomorrow for my predictions. First off, we have the dumpster fire. We have the Bears at 32, we have the Texans at 31, we have the Broncos at 30, and we have the Cardinals at 29. Not much to be said here. The Bears got blown out. The Texans got blown out. The Broncos played a pretty good game against Kansas City, and then the Cardinals lost to the Falcons to improve their losing streak. Moving on to bad, we have the Falcons at 28, we have the Rams at 27, we have the Colts at 26. Again, the Colts and Rams got blown out, and the Falcons beat the Cardinals. I mean, if everyone gets blown out in the bottom, nobody's going to move. The Falcons moved from 29 to 28, and the Cardinals moved from 28 to 29 because the Falcons beat them. Not much to be said. And then continuing on, Cleveland played, I actually could have just called this Baker Mayfield, even though Baker Mayfield isn't on the Panthers anymore, but both of these teams not the most impressive in the league, but they've had some moments. This week, obviously, the Browns were able to get a big win to just have a little bit more self-respect. Deshaun Watson actually played his first good game since returning. He hasn't had a lot of competent-looking games recently in the last few weeks, but he was able to return this week and get a good win. Sam Darnold has looked pretty, on the opposite side of the board, has looked pretty good for the last 4 weeks. He was 3-1 going into this game. They needed a win over Tampa in order to make the playoffs. They're up 21-10, and they end up losing 30-24. They gave up 20 points in the fourth quarter on defense, and Sam Darnold didn't do enough on offense to secure the victory. He did have a couple of turnovers in the game, but overall it wasn't the worst game in the world. Neither of these teams have any chance of making the playoffs at this point because the Panthers' last chance was this week against Tampa. If they won this week, then they would have a potential chance to make the playoffs. But with the loss this week, they're out. And Cleveland's been out for a couple weeks now. Moving on, we have injured plus Tennessee. I don't know how many injuries Tennessee has, but they probably have some. But they sat all of their players this week, considering that this game had no impact on their season. If they lost to the Cowboys, then they needed to beat the Jaguars to win their division. And if they beat the Cowboys, then they needed to beat the Jaguars to win their division. Either way, they needed to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars next week to win the division. Obviously, this could have had implications on the wild card spot if the AFC wild card spot wasn't so competitive. If they're in the NFC, they might have wanted to play this game out, try and get to 8-9 if they lose to Jacksonville. But 8-9 most likely won't be getting you anything in the AFC for the wild card spot, especially with the tiebreakers Tennessee has. They're not great. The Jets are 22 after their loss this week to the Seahawks. The Jets and the Seahawks were both on massive losing streaks. The Jets continued their losing streak this week by losing to the Seahawks in pathetic fashion. They've had so many injuries this season. Breece Hall has been injured. Zach Wilson's been in and out of the lineup, obviously, and then now he's officially out. Mike White even had some injuries. They've had a lot of injuries on defense. They've had injuries throughout the entirety of the season. The biggest one, obviously, being Breece Hall. When the team was doing their absolute best, Breece Hall was the running back. And then as Breece Hall got injured, the team started to slowly regress, even though they did beat Buffalo with him out. The biggest thing for the Jets is that they started off really strong. Same with the Titans, and they both regressed throughout the season. The Saints, on the other hand, have been injured the whole season. They started off bad, they continued to be bad, and then they finished off slightly better than bad. But the whole season they've had so many injuries. Kamara obviously was injured, and then he'll start off next season potentially with a suspension. He does this year, but he might get it next year. I'm not sure the whole situation with that. But the Saints are looking to next year, hopefully having a healthy team for the first time in like 5 years. They were not healthy the last year of Breeze's career. Obviously, Breeze wasn't even healthy. They weren't healthy last year. They haven't been healthy this year. And this is an extremely talented team. They have Chris Olave. They have Alvin Kamara. Jawan Johnson has had a phenomenal couple of games recently. Obviously, they have Taysom Hill, and then they just need a quarterback, and their defense has a lot of talent. Their defense has been inconsistent at times, and it was one of the worst defenses in the league for some stretches of the year, but they've had a lot of really good games. I think the Saints have a bright future if they can stay healthy next year somehow by some miracle, or if they can get a quarterback, or both. Obviously, both is preferred, but I think the Saints do have a bright future, although they most likely, I think they might be out of the playoff race at this point this season. Moving on, we have Washington at 20, we have Seattle at 19, we have the Raiders at 18, and we have the Dolphins at 17. These teams are in purgatory. None of them really have a lot of chance to make the playoffs, except for Miami, and they're not going to be getting any good draft picks. Washington, Seattle, the Raiders, and the Dolphins are all kind of stuck in that spot where it's like, at this point in the season, they probably won't be making the playoffs, and they probably will be getting bad draft picks. Dolphins can make the playoffs if the Patriots lose next week and they win. I believe if they lose next week, the Patriots win. I believe the Dolphins are in the playoffs. But they need to beat the Jets, who obviously are also on their own losing streak. The Jets and Dolphins will be fighting off to see who's going to be losing the losing streak. And then the Patriots are playing the Bills, which obviously they're more than likely going to lose. But it could be, but for both of them to happen is the only way Miami makes the playoffs. So it'll be tight. The other three teams really kind of hard, if impossible. I don't know about Seattle's tiebreaker situation with the Lions. I believe they lose tiebreakers if they're against the Packers. I do believe they lost to the Lions, so I think that the Lions would get the tiebreak in that situation, but I'm not positive. So yeah, they're pretty much all out, except for Miami, and they can't really do much. Seattle has improved from their position from last week with their win over the Jets. Wasn't very impressive. They kind of were forced to move up the rankings because the Jets were kind of tied with them in the rankings, and then they kind of blew them out. Washington has dropped in the rankings once again. A few weeks in a row they've dropped in the rankings. This was a poor performance against the Browns. Carson Wentz is the quarterback. He's not working well. Taylor Heineke obviously was the right solution for them. I'm not sure if he's injured or if they're just not playing him for some reason. But he was the solution for their team, and they're just dying right now without him. The Raiders played really good with Jarrett Stidham. Obviously, they played the Niners, one of the best teams in the league. The Niners have the best defense in the league. It's not close. And the fact that Jarrett Stidham put up 34 points in his first start with the Raiders against the Niners defense is telling. I think that the Raiders' offense can be electric with a different quarterback. I do not believe in Derek Carr. Obviously, there have been he hasn't had weapons his whole career, and there have been some seasons where the defense has been horrendously bad. But Derek Carr really is not their solution. And I don't know if Jarrett Stidham is. He probably isn't. They probably were just caught off guard by not having film for him. But Derek Carr is not their solution. And I think that Jarrett Stidham giving him a chance next season could be interesting instead of paying Derek Carr $40 million a year. The Dolphins are at 17 with their loss to the Patriots. They're on a multiple-game losing streak. I believe it's a 5-game losing streak. They dropped from 8-3 to 8-8, so they're now at 17. Tua, I don't know if he's coming back for the rest of the season. He probably won't be, and I don't think that... and that's another reason why I think that it's a long shot for them to beat the Jets next week, because Skylar Thompson will more than likely be their quarterback. And although they did get one touchdown drive with him during the Patriots game, I don't see them putting up a whole lot of points on the Jets' defense. The Dolphins will need to win the game defensively, and their defense really has not been the star of their team this season. So we'll see what happens, but not a lot of hope for a lot of these teams. I don't see any of them majorly improving next season unless the Raiders pick up a quarterback. But the Dolphins, if they get healthy, if Tua gets healthy, if they get some defensive key players, then they could be really good next year. But we've been saying that about Miami for the last 3 seasons, and none of those seasons they've been able to pick up the slack to make the playoffs. Moving on, we have whatever this is. We have the Steelers at 16, Patriots at 15, the Giants at 14, the Buccaneers at 13, and the Packers at 12. I would have the Steelers higher, but they still didn't beat Lamar. If they beat Lamar, they would be higher, but they didn't beat Lamar. They lost to Tyler Huntley, and then they beat Tyler Huntley. So they went 1-1 against Tyler Huntley. If they beat Lamar, they'd be higher, but for right now, they're at 16. The Steelers are 8-8, Patriots are 8-8, Bucs are 8-8, Packers are 8-8, and then the Giants are 9-6-1. The Giants are in this category because I reevaluated their team. They've been in the top 10 for most of the season on my rankings, but I reevaluated them this week, and I really just can't put them back in the top 10. They haven't won a competitive game against a good team that's going to be in the playoffs or is even fighting for a playoff spot, other than Washington, who they tied with and then beat them, since October. Like, the Giants really, like, they started off strong, but after their first month of the season, they've really just fallen off. They haven't beaten anyone significant. They've lost to some bad teams. They've lost to every significant game they've played. And I think that although they are in the playoffs, I don't see them doing anything. I have them at 14. The Packers, on the other hand, beat a very significant team in the Minnesota Vikings this week to claim a chance at a playoff spot. If they beat the Lions next week, they're in. So big win this week against the Vikings. Massive point differential as well. They won, I believe, 41-10 or something. It was a big game. Tampa beat the Carolina Panthers in order to clinch their division. Obviously, that's not the biggest game in the world, but I've kept the Packers and Tampa together the whole season. Sometimes they flip-flop. Sometimes Tampa's been higher. Sometimes the Packers have been higher. But they stayed generally together for most of the year because they've been on the same trajectory. They started off good, then they went bad, then they went real bad, then they went horrendously bad, and then they've both crawled their way back to a playoff spot. The Buccaneers, obviously with Tom Brady, and the Packers, obviously with Aaron Rodgers, get the spots at 12 and 13 over the rest of the teams here simply because of quarterback. I'm not going to put Kenny Pickett, Mac Jones, or Daniel Jones above Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, no matter how mediocre their seasons have been, because even though Daniel Jones is doing okay this year, he's not throwing the ball at all. Mac Jones isn't throwing the ball at all, and he's doing not great. If we threw it more, we'd probably do better, but I'm not a coach. And the Steelers have Kenny Pickett. I'm not putting Kenny Pickett above Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. The Steelers, obviously, they've made a comeback. They're fighting for a playoff spot, but I can't give it to them because they just haven't played anyone. Obviously they played the Ravens this week, but they beat Tyler Huntley. And they haven't beaten anyone else significant. They just haven't. They beat Tampa, but, I mean, Tampa's a different team than they were when they played the Steelers. And, yeah. As for the Patriots, it's been an okay season. It's been up and down. I think that we could be higher. We could be better. Obviously, we could have beaten the Vikings if we didn't run into the kicker. We could have beaten the Bengals if we didn't fumble the ball. And we could have beaten the Raiders if we weren't stupid. All those games we could have won if we weren't stupid. And two of those teams are extremely good. But I'm not here to complain. I'm here to tell you the Patriots need better coaching. They need more discipline. And they need a different offensive scheme if they want to be a good team. And right now, even though we have probably the most talented team of the 5 teams here, obviously we're not the best team because we don't work as a team. Moving on, we have rising and falling. We have the Lions at 11, we have the Chargers at 10, we have the Jaguars at 9, we have the Vikings at 8, and we have the Ravens at 7. This category gave me a lot of headaches because a lot of these teams have played each other, and there's a lot you can't really go with individual matchups. Similar to the last one, you can't really go with individual matchups because last time there weren't a lot. This category, there's so many of them that you just can't use them. The Lions got blown out by the Lions blew out the Jaguars. The Jaguars blew out the Chargers. The Ravens lost to Jacksonville, but they beat someone else. There's a lot of confusing things in here. Baltimore's at 7 because Lamar will be back for the playoffs. If Lamar wasn't going to be back for the playoffs, Baltimore would not be at 7. But they are at 7 because Lamar will be back for the playoffs. Or from what I've heard, Lamar will be back for the playoffs. I'm putting them where they will be when Lamar gets back. The Vikings are at 8 because they got demolished this week by the Packers. Obviously, it was in Lambeau, but they should have won that. They should have been able to be at least close in that game. And that's their second game where they've been demolished this season. And they haven't been able to demolish anyone else. They haven't been able to have a singular dominant win all season. And every other one of the teams in this category has. The Vikings are propelled up at number 8 by their record. They've stayed at number 8 the whole time. I almost put them below Jacksonville, but I figured if I put them below Jacksonville, I also need to put them below the Lions, because the Lions did beat them. And there's just a lot going on here. The Vikings are at 8, out of respect for Kirk Cousins, but I really have zero faith in their team to do well in the playoffs. The Jaguars are at 9. If they lose to Tennessee next week, they'll probably be knocked out of the top 10 in the final rankings, but for right now they're at 9. They had a rough start to the season, but Trevor Lawrence found his groove. They're on track to make the playoffs if they win next week, and Jacksonville's looking like a very dangerous team. They've put up a lot of points recently. Their offense is clicking. Trevor didn't even have a good game this week. They just found other ways to score points. They found other ways to win, and Jacksonville's looking really strong. The Lions have one of the best offenses in the league, in my opinion. They found ways to win with every player that they have. Jared Goff is having a phenomenal season. If they win next week, I believe they are in. Again, I'm not sure the tiebreaker situation with Seattle, but I believe if they win next week, then they're in. And I'm really rooting for them. I think that the Lions have a really fun team to watch. And yeah, they came on really strong in the second half too. I think that they had one of the worst records in the league for a while. And once they got healthy, they were injured for the first 5 weeks of the season. That's why they started 1-4. But since then, they've been 7-4, and they've looked really good. And the Chargers are at 10. I don't know where to put the Chargers. They've been up and down all season. I didn't really trust them. I still don't trust them. Obviously, they blew out a bad team this week. You don't know if that's really them being good or if it's just them playing the Rams. They are healthy now, which is a very big positive for them. And I think that if they continue to do well as a healthy team, then they have some chances in the playoffs, but they do not look like an elite team, in my opinion. Moving on to the NFL's elite. We are back to 6 teams. Yes, for the first time in a few weeks. The Vikings dropped out of the category with the Packers, with the Cowboys. So I put the Cowboys back in the elite. We have the Eagles at 1. We have the Niners at 2. We have the Bengals at 3. We have the Bills at 4. Chiefs at 5. And Cowboys at 6. None of these teams have really moved in a number of weeks, so they're all just going to stay where they are. The Eagles are still at 1 because Jalen Hurts still is not playing. And yeah, they lost to the Saints. It was a bad game, but I still think that the Eagles are the best team in the league. I think that with Jalen Hurts playing, the Eagles are the best team in the league. Gardner Minshew has not played well. Gardner Minshew turned the ball over a bunch of times in their first game without Jalen Hurts, and he has continued to play horribly. The defense played well still, relatively speaking, and I just can't move the Eagles out of 1 if Jalen Hurts isn't playing. The Niners obviously have a close game against the Raiders, but they won a tight game against a new quarterback, new system. It was a good game. Obviously, the Niners' defense is the best defense in the league, and it was a surprising game for them to allow so many points. But it was a good showing that they can win offensive, high-powered games when they need to, and they can score on demand with Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy can score on demand against anyone. The Bengals and Bills are still at 3 and 4. Obviously, I hate having to make this video before their game. I don't know why they're on Monday Night Football instead of Sunday Night Football. I am so sorry. I said last week that whoever won that game would be at number 1, and they haven't played yet. So, whoever wins that game, honorary number 1. Right now they're 3 and 4, but whoever wins that game is honorary number 1, and then whoever loses is number 4. The Eagles would be 2, and the Niners would be 3. So whoever wins that game tomorrow is number 1, but I make these on Sunday night because that's when I make them, and whoever wins that game will be number 1. Kansas City's at 5, and the Cowboys are at 6. So, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace. Huge shout out to Quinn Lacey for supporting the channel with a channel membership.